Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast, inspiring real women with a passion for fishing and the outdoors to go get their adventure on. Now, here's your host, Angie Scott and Barb Carey.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast. I'm going to do something a little different this week, something we haven't done in a while. I'm going to do a solo episode today. Matter of fact, I don't remember the last solo one. It might have been on getting your captain's license, and that would have been way back when this was still called It Pays to Fish. So anyway, I was prepping the episode for the Nashville Boat Show, and I started thinking about some things, and I thought it might be worth making this into a two-parter. The second part's going to be sharing the live podcast that we did, the audio from that. If you didn't catch it on Facebook or you don't have time to sit down and watch the video, but you can listen in the car, it's definitely worth sharing the audio version so you can catch the stories of the amazing women who came out. The Nashville Boat Show is the largest show of its kind. They have over 300 boats, and it took place at the Music City Center in downtown Nashville. Our live show was Saturday, January 11th. It took place at noon at the Hawg Trough. Saturday is by far the most heavily attended day of the 4-day show, and we were super fortunate that show manager Kim Muncie is very passionate about getting more women involved in boating and fishing, and she did a lot to help us bring the live podcast to fruition. We're also thankful to Barbara Harris for putting us in contact with several of the amazing guests. And it was kind of cool. The first two guests that we featured, we literally just met that morning walking the floor of the show. And that was Mariah from Freedom Boat Club out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and Diane Montgomery from Lebanon, Tennessee, who fishes with the LBA. We also had Paula Kathy Smith from Waverly, Tennessee. She caught a 88-pound catfish last year that totally went viral and changed her life. Teri Cindric from Nashville. I've known Teri for a couple of years. I've seen her at some of the shows. She's a kayak angler. She fishes with the KFBTN. Michelle Norrod from Goodlettsville, Tennessee. She was the 2019 American Fishing Tour Lady Angler of the Year. Deanna Lavorne from Bradyville, Tennessee. I might have still got her name wrong, but she's the LBA Classic Co-Angler Champion in 2016 and 2019. And then finally, we welcomed Dena Vick back to the show, stopped off in Nashville on her way home from the ATA conference in Indianapolis. Dena works for Traditions Media, and she's always got sage advice for lady anglers wanting to go pro and or how to get sponsors. So it was really cool to have her back on the show. I think she's the only one that we've had on 3 times now, if I'm not mistaken. And we just keep running into her at big events throughout the country. So really appreciated her stopping off in Nashville and being on the show, coming out to the event. And she's actually part of the Woman Ice Angler Project, which, as this episode comes out, starts tomorrow, Wednesday, and runs through Saturday. Saturday's the public event, so I hope a lot of you ladies are coming out to that. I hope to meet some of you I haven't met yet and see some of you that I have met before again. Everyone that I've met so far has been absolutely awesome. They're doing a VIP meet and greet event Friday evening before the public event on Saturday. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Look forward to more on that in future episodes. I'll be up there covering and recording some audio and stuff. So it's going to be a real fun time. I think there's some TV coverage, and it's going to be a pretty big deal. So, but the boat show taught me a lot of things, and I wanted to share those with you in hopes that it might help someone else out there listening. I'm going to get a bit vulnerable in this episode, so hope you bear with me. One of the great things I learned is that though I don't see a lot of women out fishing independently here on my lake very often, we've talked about that on the show before, there are some super amazing women anglers right here in my area, and together we can help inspire more women to get out and give it a try. I have no doubt after you listen to part 2 of this episode, you're going to be fired up to challenge yourself and take your fishing to the next level like I am. These ladies are looking challenges in the face and doing amazing things in the sport. So take some time and network in your area. If you don't know of any other women anglers, I bet they're out there and you just might have to do a little digging like I did. So I'm super pumped to have uncovered all these amazing ladies, and I'm sure there's way more. And so I'm excited to keep digging and doing some networking myself and hopefully inspiring other women in our area. So the other thing it taught me is the importance of taking care of yourself. I shared my experience from the boat show already with Jen Ripple from Dun Magazine and Susan Thrasher from Music City Fly Girls. We've been meeting on a somewhat regular basis, bouncing ideas off each other and encouraging each other and supporting each other in our endeavors in the fishing industry. It's good to have a group of women like Jen and Susan to meet with and, know you're not the only one out there trying to make things happen. But anyway, after I shared my story, Susan encouraged me to share it with others, is that it could be really helpful to other people out there. And after thinking about it for a bit, I agree. So that's why I decided it was worth making this into an episode in and of itself and then doing a part 2 with the live podcast that we did. So you see, I went from flying up to Milwaukee for the MPA conference in Wisconsin Dells, where Barb and I hosted a social hour / mixer and a women's roundtable discussion, which really turned more into a panel type discussion as we actually had more guys in the audience than women who were genuinely interested in getting our insight on how they could do better in their businesses and be more inclusive to women, which was really awesome. And we'll have more on that to come. And, the MPAA conference, the National Professional Anglers Association, was just a really awesome experience in general. For me, it was my first one. And from night 1, Friday night, the mixer I was talking about, we had about, maybe 8 or 9 ladies show up. And several of them were spouses of professional anglers, so not all of them were actually in the industry themselves, but it was cool because we started going around the room and they were sharing their stories, and they all have personal experiences with fishing, so it was cool to hear. And after a little while, these 2 older gentlemen came in, and the one guy said, "Hey, do you mind if I sit in and observe?" And I was like, "Sure. Yeah, go ahead." I mean, it's kind of strange, but yeah, definitely. And so after we ended up going around the room, the one guy spoke up and he said, "I'm Ron Lindner." And that was pretty cool. I don't know if you're familiar. I haven't seen Ron in a while, so I guess I just didn't put 2 and 2 together, but that's Al Lindner's older brother. And it was cool because he was just really genuinely interested in what's going on with women in fishing nowadays. And same thing with the panel, the guys that we had come out. It was just cool to see that guys are genuinely interested in how do we get more women involved? What are we doing? Or what can we do differently to be more inclusive? And so it was just really encouraging. The whole theme of the conference was fueled by passion. We're all in this industry because we're passionate about the sport of fishing, and it's our passion that drives, it was actually driven by passion, not fueled by passion, but it drives us to continue doing what we do. It's not a super lucrative industry in general. There's a few that make a really, really good living at it, but most of us are just kind of getting by. And hopefully you're paying your bills. I'm not quite to that point yet, but hopefully I will be at some point. But, you got to be passionate about it, and we are, and that's what moves us forward and causes us to step out of our comfort zones and try new things. So Mike Iaconelli's speech was really, really awesome. Johnny Morris from Bass Pro Shops, it was just really cool to hear about the history of the sport from his perspective and how he built Bass Pro Shops into what it is today. So I just really enjoyed the whole conference. But from there, we pretty much immediately left right after our roundtable discussion, which, like I said, was kind of more like a panel with Barb and myself up on stage. We drove up to Upper Red Lake in northern Minnesota, which was quite a long drive, and we were going to spend 2 nights and basically 2.5 days out on the ice in sleeper shacks, ice fishing. Super, super fun. We did a 5-minute Friday a while back that kind of recapped that, or gave you a little taste, should I say, no pun intended, of that event. And so go check that out if you missed it. And from there, I hitched a ride with Vicky, one of my most favorite people in the whole wide world, and Vicky Jung, and she gave me a ride down to my brother's house in Farmington. Spent the night there, actually my brother's girlfriend's house, aka sister-in-law, long story. But anyway, I spent the night there, and then my nephew took me to the airport the next day. Got home pretty late the next evening, and I had to be back downtown Nashville at the Music City Center by 5:45 a.m. to be interviewed on the news. So that was super cool. I got to get on 2 different channels promoting the Nashville Boat Show. Never been on the news like that before, but everybody said I did a good job, so I was happy to hear that feedback. It was fun. I went home for a couple hours, ran through my seminar that I was going to be giving later that afternoon, and got back down at the boat show at 2:00 and worked in the Anderson Marine area, which Anderson Marine's my dealer here in Old Hickory, Tennessee. Great people, great family-owned company. They've been around for a long time, and they carry Quest pontoons, which is how I developed a relationship with them, which was my first pontoon that I bought at the boat show 5 years ago, and haven't looked back ever since. So after that, I had my first ever seminar, which also so happened to be on top of the Hawg Trough, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Hawg Trough, but it's a 5,000-gallon tank. I actually found out a secret. It's really more like 3,000 gallons, but it's full of fish, and that took place at 7 p.m., Other than the dude who stood there watching the entire time with his arms crossed, the seminar went pretty well. For the first time, there's some jitters initially, especially being up that high, giving a seminar. You got to cast into this really super narrow lane, but I was pretty confident that wasn't going to be an issue, and it wasn't. So actually it was kind of fun, I enjoyed it. But right after that got done, we headed to the airport to pick up Barb and Ricky, who were coming in for the big live show on Saturday. So Friday we were at it again. The show started at noon, and I had 2 seminars that day, one at 2 and one at 6. Barb and Ricky were there for my 2:00 seminar, which was cool. And they missed the second one because they got sucked into the Nashville life down on Lower Broadway. And if you didn't catch that 5-minute Friday episode, you need to go see that. It was super fun. It's called I'm on a Boat. But both seminars went really well that day. The second one, actually, I had a kind of a fan club. I look up, and it's all the folks from Anderson Marine came over to watch. So that was pretty fun. But Friday night, we had a little fun on the dock when we got home. Stayed up a bit later than we should have, especially with such a big day ahead of us on Saturday. But luckily, we didn't have to be there super early. The show started at 10, so we got down there just a little bit after 10. There was some pretty bad storms rolling through, a lot of wind. Barb and Ricky got a pretty interesting experience on the houseboat with it rocking quite a bit with the wind. And we weren't sure how the turnout was going to be Saturday because of the weather, but luckily all our guests made it to the show safely and on time. I was running around, busy greeting people, talking to our friends and family who were coming out for the show, making sure we had everything set up and connected to record it. And, ran into the Freedom Boat Club folks, wanted to have Mariah on kind of last minute, ran into Diana Montgomery from the LBAA. So just getting all that set up. And as you're about to hear next week, that show went really, really well. We had a great, steady crowd throughout the duration of the show, and we hope to do a lot more of these in the future. I think it was a really, really good thing for the community to see these amazing local anglers, and I think you're going to enjoy as well. So the rest of the afternoon was pretty busy, talking to friends and family, trying to hang around the Anderson Marine space as much as possible. And I'd be lying if I didn't say part of my mind was on the big Vikings playoff game, which was going to be starting just a little after 3. If they could pull off a win against the 49ers, they'd be headed to the NFC Championship game. So it was a pretty big deal. I'm a pretty diehard Vikings fan, so I know we have a lot of listeners from Wisconsin, and it is what it is. Hey, I grew up in Minnesota. But I couldn't think about that too much because I had another seminar to give at the Hawg Trough at 4 p.m. And like I mentioned earlier, Saturday was definitely going to be the biggest crowd of the entire show. So a little bit after 3, I brought all my demo rods up the ladder to the Hawg Trough platform, which is meant to look like the front of a bass boat. And it had gotten pretty cluttered up there between Joey Monteleone and the guy who constructed the Hawg Trough, Billy Hurt, as they've been giving seminars all throughout the weekend as well. And it just seemed like every time there'd be a few extra rods up there, maybe a couple drinks and things like that, and stuff just kind of started piling up and space was getting pretty limited. And I should mention too, that ladder, it's secure, but as you go up it does move back and forth. It's a little bit intimidating. Barb and Ricky had already taken their seats in front of the tank, and Ricky had pulled up the big game on her phone, but she needed a tripod to set it on, so I ran back over to Anderson Marine to grab it. Then I went over to the TWRA booth to get their inflatable PFD. I had decided Friday afternoon I was going to do the same thing so I could wear it and have a minute before I got into my demonstration to talk about the importance of wearing your life jacket. And Betsy Woods from the TWRA, that's the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, she informed me that she had an extra cartridge, so if I wanted to go ahead and demonstrate inflating the vest, I was more than welcome to. I was like, really? And I kind of thought, oh, that might be awesome. I could do that as like my big grand finale. So I went back over to the Hawg Trough to share the news with Barb and Ricky. Barb warned me, she's like, well, you might not want to do that while you're standing way up there. Having never had to inflate one before, I wasn't aware that they can be pretty intense, and they were kind of worried about the possibility of it startling me and me falling off the platform. So I was like, kind of like, yikes, maybe I don't want to do that. So before I knew it, it was 4:00. So I put on the headset, climbed up the metal wobbly ladder, and turned on the microphone, and I said, welcome everyone to the Nashville Boat Show. And I looked down at Dena, who was signaling for me to move the mic a little further away from my lips. Apparently I was a bit too loud. So I made the adjustment and started getting into it. But first I made a joke about missing the Vikings playoff game, but Ricky, who had the game up, would be giving me the play-by-play. I think there's actually a picture floating around on Facebook where you can see the game on the screen and me up on the Hawg Trough in the background about to give the seminar. So I look out into the big sea of people and I begin talking about the importance of wearing your PFD. So then I started talking about the topic of my seminar, which is an idea that was given to me by Barb called Where's the Bait? The plan was to demonstrate several different methods of targeting different levels of the water column based on where the fish are feeding at any particular time. And also to remind more seasoned anglers to not get locked into one certain way of fishing every time, because fish can be found at all different levels. You need to be prepared to make adjustments based on what you're observing when you go out. And, if you're not putting the bait in front of the fish, your chances of catching them are pretty non-existent. So it's kind of important to think about that. So since this was a boat show and not a fishing show, we wanted to keep it fairly basic and something that people who have never fished before but were interested in giving it a try would be able to follow and understand. So I started out with the most basic, kind of how most of us started off fishing as kids, with a simple fixed bobber on a push button reel. And I talked about the advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, you can't cast it very far because the further you move your bobber away from the hook, the more line you have out, and it gets kind of clumsy to try to cast it. And so it's really good for if you're targeting like 1 to 4 feet of water, but once you start getting beyond that, you need to move on to something else like a slip bobber. So as I reached out to pick up my rod, my foot knocked a nearly empty plastic tea bottle off the platform all the way down to where Billy Hurt was sitting below, and about hit him in the head. And I was like, oops, look out below. So that kind of freaked me out a little bit, seeing that bottle fall that whole distance. And anyway, I went on to try and demonstrate the fixed bobber. Oh, crap. The swim bait I'd tied on, which was just for demonstration purposes, was still attached to my rod with a snap swivel. You see, Cheryl Smith, which thankfully I'd reached out to her. I figured maybe, I know she does a lot of seminars, and as I was preparing for this, was hoping maybe she'd done some from the Hawg Trough before, and sure enough she had. So thanks for Cheryl to giving me the tip that you're not supposed to actually catch the fish, so they want you to either remove the hooks or bend them. And I was kind of planning on doing that anyway, but I was glad to have her tell me that that's actually what they want you to do. So anyway, in order to keep my lines neat, and since I didn't have any hooks, I just attached snap swivels to all my baits and hooked them that way. Well, I thought all my rods were ready to go, but in the busyness of the day and all the distractions, apparently I overlooked that step. So now here I am standing up there in front of the biggest sea of people, several of them I knew, and a whole bunch more that I didn't, trying to demonstrate what I was telling everyone was the simplest setup to catch fish, and I couldn't even get my bait unattached from the rod. So instead of demonstrating that, I just kind of talked my way through it and then skipped on to the next thing, the slip bobber. So I reached down to pull that up. Oh no, that was still attached too. I looked out in the crowd again. There's my cousin Greg and his family who came down from Clarksville. There's Barb's. What's she doing? She's holding up a phone. Oh no, she's live streaming this whole disaster. At that point, there was no recovering. Lack of sleep, lack of proper fuel, lack of hydration and concentration and preparation. I basically stood no chance at that point. After getting a little lightheaded and my knees started knocking, my voice started quivering, and it was just kind of moving throughout my body, I started to climb back down to the floor. The thought of running out the back door briefly crossed my mind, but I knew I just couldn't do that. Instead, I got down, I apologized to the crowd. I kind of blamed it on my fear of heights, which was no doubt part of it. I know seeing that tea bottle fall, that distance kind of triggered something in my mind at that point, but I made a joke that I was wearing my PFD, at least if I was gonna fall in, which, by the way, Joey Monteleone told me he's actually seen somebody fall into the Hawg Trough before. So once down on the ground, I regained my composure a bit. Dena thankfully climbed up the ladder and started bringing my rods down so I could continue my seminar. Although it wasn't going to be nearly as effective without actually being able to demonstrate the methods I was going over in the Hawg Trough tank, but I was so thankful she did that for me, because she's a bit afraid of heights herself, but she's been making great strides lately because of her new job that's been forcing her to work up on some pretty high heights. So anyway, my last three things that I was showing people was this, after the slip bobber, was the Ned rig, the Rapala countdown, and finally the Whopper plopper. So I talked my way through those pretty quickly, probably skipping a lot of points I intended to make, but I'm not entirely sure. There was one really sweet lady sitting at the far end of the trough, and I was able to key in on her. And that helped a great deal. I could tell she was really genuinely interested in the information I was sharing. And I went up and spoke to her one-on-one after I finished my seminar, and it was really cool. She'd never tried the Whopper plopper before, but she couldn't wait to give it a try, and she started sharing me photos of all her best catches that she had on her phone, and it was great to have made that connection. So all in all, I made it through. I got a lot of amazing words of support after the seminar and the next day. Most people told me how they couldn't even imagine climbing up there in the first place, let alone doing demonstrations and giving a seminar. And since I'd already done it 3 times before without issue, I knew that I knew I could do it. It was just that it happened to be the perfect storm of exhaustion, dehydration, and lack of focus. And perhaps that was the Vikings' problem too, because they seemingly didn't stand a chance against the 49ers that day. So I thought about this more recently when I sat down to interview Tom Rowland for an upcoming podcast episode. To me, Tom's the epitome of fitness in the fishing industry. If you're not familiar with Tom, he's on the Saltwater Experience, and he produces a couple other shows, Into the Blue and Sweetwater, which is a bass fishing show. He grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so he's not too far from me. It was cool to get to sit down with him in person in his studio at Waypoint TV. But he CrossFit trains, and he's even been through the Navy SEALs SEAL Fit program, which is like a 50-hour, super intense kind of Hell Week type fitness program, and it really challenges you mentally. I can't even imagine trying to do that. But we talked about the importance of taking care of yourself, and perhaps most importantly than anything else, the importance of getting enough sleep. It seems like that can be the common denominator, because it throws everything else out of whack if you haven't had enough sleep. You know, if you don't have enough mental clarity, you don't have enough energy to go out and exercise, you tend to make poor decisions, eat poorly, and it's a vicious cycle. So it's super important to take care of yourself, especially if you want to have longevity, to enjoy the sport fishing for many years to come. Though it's not necessarily like a physical sport, it certainly doesn't help to be well rested, have good balance, a strong core, a strong back. If you're going out for a long day of fishing on the water, especially if you're musky fishing or bass fishing where you're going to be constantly casting and reeling. Or if you tournament fish, it's extra important. 2 back-to-back 8-hour days of fishing can really take a toll, and you want to be the best angler you can be. And it's a lot of things you need to keep in mind. Now, I'm not saying you need to do anything as extreme as Tom, but he issued a really cool challenge to all his listeners in January. Just work out for 20 minutes a day for 20 days in a row. And it can be anything from as simple as walking for 20 minutes to jogging to weightlifting or any combination. Just anything you can do to exercise for 20 minutes. 20 days in a row. And I think that's a really great challenge. You can start it at any time and just see how your life changes after that 20-day commitment. If you do it, be sure and let me know. I'd love to pass along your success to Tom. I know since my boat show experience, I've been making a huge effort to improve my health, starting out with cutting out alcohol, getting enough sleep each night. Now I've been adding in a little exercise each day and being mindful of the fuel that I'm putting into my body. So hopefully this story has inspired you. If nothing else, has served as a good reminder, if you're going to be doing something like giving fishing seminars, to make sure you're taking care of yourself first and not overcommitting to too much. And thanks as always for tuning in. I hope you come back next week for part 2 of our Nashville Boat Show experience, where we're going to share the audio from our first ever live podcast featuring some amazing ladies in the boating and fishing industry. Be sure you're subscribed and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And remember, we're better together.